Hello and welcome to the Amber Stitt Show, and I'm your host, Amber Stitt. And today we welcome back my friend, Jovita. Thanks for being here again, Jovita.
Yes, thanks for having me. I love this show.
Last time we were together, we did a deep dive into emotional intelligence. And for those of you that have not listened to that episode yet, I recommend you going back and checking that out. But let's have you, Jovita, talk a little bit about yourself and what you do every day. And then we can then start talking a little bit about a bigger push into our focus on money segment. But I would like the audience to know a little bit about you before we begin.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for having me. My name is Jovita. I started Grow with Jovita several years ago, and I've been in management and leadership development for over 8 years now. And the reason I started Grow with Jovita is just I saw a lack of leadership development in the corporate world, especially for women. I really saw that in my career as I was moving up into executive level positions, and I really wanted to provide that for other people. So I provide career coaching, and part of the career coaching is also about money because most of the
Mm-hmm.
time people are like, okay, I want to make more money. And it's like, but why? What are you going to do with that money? Because if you don't have smart money management, making more money isn't going to help you.
Mm-hmm. Building that bridge between emotional intelligence and setting up these money goals. I always call it get money smart. But we always start with focusing on talents. And I know that you and I both have taken multiple personality assessments, but you had recently have taken the Gallup Strength Finders assessment. And that is something that I also work within every day. And so I think that's really instrumental once you kind of focus on your top strengths. We want to develop those talents. And then we don't want to fix what we aren't, but be aware of maybe what we're not so talented in. Sometimes we just have to pull out those talents for a short period of time, but it's really certainly not where we do our best work. And so I always like starting with that as a foundation and then bringing that into the money management piece. So I really think that what you bring to the table and what you do with your clients is really important. So let's talk about that a little bit more today. I've met some very high performing like titans who don't give it all away because they want
Yeah.
that boutique approach. So it's not like you always need to stay in your lane, but like you need to know where your talents are.
Right. I mean,
But
there's a
then,
balance to everything, right? Like, there is a balance of I can't be I have to be myself because like you said earlier, like I need to be aligned with like how I feel, and when you're not being true to yourself, you're like disaligned and it causes these like reactions out of you. But to a certain extent, I do still need to understand that there are other people out there that are not like me, and I can't just put how I am on everybody else. So there's definitely a balance. Like with delegating, like you said, it's an easy one of there's certain things that I don't like delegating, like this is mine and I'm going to hold on to it. But there are
yeah.
other things that I've learned how to delegate. And a lot of that again is a reframe of, what am I,
Yeah, like
why am I doing it?
if you can
And
do it but not do it super well, then you probably need to delegate it.
yeah. And it's kind of like you got to accept. I think the thing that's the hardest about delegating is like you have to accept that people are not going to do it the same way that you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the when I first started delegating, it was because it's one of those things that hold you back in your career. If you're really good at this thing, then they are going to always want you to do this thing. You're never going to be able to backfill your position or backfill these tasks. And that's when people are like, oh my gosh, I'm doing like the job of two or three people. And it's like, yeah, because you've taken on this stuff and you don't know how to let anything go. So
Yeah.
not only are you like not moving up in your career because nobody else can do the thing that you're doing, but now you're overwhelmed and stressed because you're doing all of these things. And that's kind of what, again, I had to realize like, this isn't helping me by holding on to these things. It's actually hurting me.
You mean like things
And
you could cross train for to let someone else assist, but it's
yeah,
not like your true on best talents. It's like you can do it and do it right,
yeah.
but it's something that could be cross trained so someone else could be pulled in so then you can go in and master what you really need to be
Right.
mastering.
You should be focused, and that's again the best part of the reframe right there. It's like I can be focusing on high impact, different activities, mind development and growth instead of still doing this thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's the same kind of concept. It just works every single time. It's like if you just kind of take a step back and realize why am I not letting this go? Like what is my emotion about this? Is it because I'm worried that somebody's going to look at me as like why am I not doing this? Is it because
Hmm.
I have trouble trusting other people? Is it because, like, what is it? Like, what is that emotion? And then, like you said, reframing it, and then you're good to go. So, like, once you get that reframe, it just makes you, again, you're still going to feel that feeling, but it's not going to be as strong, and it's not
Mhm.
going to cause you to behave in that way, right? So,
So some teams don't do the full on personal development together. So you might have one or two of us that are like, hey, I know who I am. And maybe other people don't know how this might all work yet. It's still powerful to be in the room because I think that brings confidence. When you know who you are and how you might tick, you might be able to actually explain that to your boss, or even in an interview. I've had people use me for some consulting and say, hey, I'm about to go in for an interview. Do I bring up the fact that I've done Strength Finders or the DISC or Myers? And I say, you probably can bring it up, because if you say, I lead with, these are my talents, and those questions are like, what are your positives, or what are the old school, interview questions that are out there? You can kind of almost reframe those and not answer those specifically like my negative things are, but you could say, for example, I'm high communication. And you mentioned in our original episode together, kind of like when you lose somebody, you can just see their body language change. When I work with my clients, I'm great at giving a lot of information in a small window of time, and it's specifically because they're looking for an insurance product. They're coming to me because they know they want it. It's not like I'm just trying to explain, here's why you need it. They're coming to me, I know they want it, so I package the information, make it as clear as possible. I'm really efficient with my time, very important. And if we're really short on time and we end the call quickly, there's no feelings hurt. We did our job. So when I take that same type of mindset and I go out into a different experience and I'm talking about, hey, what do you do? Or people might ask me and I'm explaining it. It's like you can just see their eyes glaze over, like, what are you talking about? Risk management, insurance? And I just have to go, don't get your feelings hurt, Amber, because it's not their thing until maybe it's time. But I know that, and I know not to take things personal. So my high communication can be very overwhelming. And my grandmother, I talk about her on my podcast, where she knows what her strengths are, and she has gone decades feeling a little bad about herself because she can overwhelm because she has high input, just like me. And I said, Grandma, about 6 months ago, I go, that is because you have high intellection, futuristic, and all these things. You love learning and then you want to give it away. And she goes, oh my gosh, my mother used to tell me, stop talking so much, Marjorie. And I go, oh, Grandma, if only they had this back then, you wouldn't have felt so
right?
bad. But
Yes.
I know my communication is so important for certain parts of my work, but I know that I have to turn it off. And especially with my husband, sometimes he does not want to hear about the latest thing that I'm implementing, especially on social media. He just goes, whew, his eyes just glaze over, and I just know it's not the time. So utilizing some of that in your work or your individual life, so it can be fun when you just know how things are working and why there could be a trigger, but you just know how to kind of just set back, and it's just not the time or place. So,
Yeah, so like the thing that you're talking about is we have to be willing to accept that, like, I'm not for everybody, right? Like, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I can't control like that part of, like you're saying, if you're working in a team or if you're out networking or even in your family, right? Like, I can't control that, like everything about my personality isn't going to gel or be interesting to other people. But what I can do is manage my own feelings about that, right? So like you said, are my feelings hurt about it? Do I feel some kind of way about that? I can still manage that. And then I can also pay more attention to other people. So like the
mhm.
thing that I love about self-awareness and like emotional intelligence is, like, the better you get at understanding yourself, the more easily you can understand other people. So like
Yes.
your interpersonal savvy skills are going to also increase, because now you're noticing other people's behavior, their attitudes and things, to where it's going to make it so much more, like, your connection with those people are going to be so much stronger because you are trying to relate and communicate in the style that they need, right? Like, you're not just me, and this is me. You're also trying to almost like collaborate in your conversations. Like, your
hmm
conversation should be two-way. It shouldn't just be you talking at somebody. It should be both of you all engaging. And in order for people to feel safe enough to open up and be vulnerable, you
Hmm.
have to create that sense of safety. And you do that by using these emotional intelligence and self-awareness techniques.
Yep. So I think that is a perfect place to segue into focusing on money because we all operate differently. We all receive information differently. I love a hardcover book. I don't do well with, say, a screen and going through pages, where some of my friends love to hear audiobooks. My husband doesn't prefer to read. He likes more of that video. So people receive information differently. When we go into really getting money smart, I call it getting money smart your way, focusing on your talents first, then how do you set your money goals? I thought, Jovita, it would be perfect for us to talk about that today because you really get the emotional intelligence piece, understanding the personal development, but then the self-awareness. Wouldn't it be amazing if you could set your money goals based upon your personality? And oh my gosh, I always think of this like if you're working with a partner, it could be a business partner, a spouse partner. What if we were kind to each other to say, hey, we're going to look at this differently, but we're going to be a team and really build this out to have some success. But it's got to be on my own metrics for me. Your metrics are yours. But let's talk about it because that to me would just cut out so much maybe noise when it comes to when we work on it's not always about couples, but like if we could understand how we can manage our money and little hacks and tricks and little things we might need based upon our personality, we could have more success. And then if we could understand how others might participate in that, whether it's a spouse, a child, or business partner, if we can come together and be okay with the fact that we are different, I think that there's definitely ways to have more success. So I want to talk about that today for my second piece of the pathways of peak performance is focusing on money, but doing it your way. So Jovita, let's talk a little bit about we had touched on emotional intelligence in our first episode together. Let's start there again. Let's do like a little mini crash course on what that is coming from your perspective, because I think that's a way to really start, because then we can dive into goal setting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that you start with the focus on talents and focus on money because it's definitely something in my career coaching business that I help women with as well. Because when you think about trying to develop or grow or enhance your career, the money part of that is goes hand in hand. Like you're advancing your career or you're trying to make more money or get a raise or get a promotion because you're trying to achieve certain things in your life, right? So I always say your career is a tool for you to build the life that you want.
Yes, I
And
love that you say that.
money is an emotional topic. So you can't talk about money without talking about the emotions attached to that. So the emotional intelligence, like just to touch on again what we talked about, is really about understanding yourself and correctly identifying your emotions, being able to proactively manage them so that your behavior and attitude and reactions are positive and not coming across in a negative way or hurting you in a negative way. It's going to help you reduce that emotional stress. To
Yep.
your point about whether it's a spouse, another family member, a roommate, right? Like if you have emotional intelligence and understand other people's emotions and feelings about money, it's going to make it easier for you to have those conversations. And then finally, just you really want to have a positive relationship with money. I know that in our society there's a lot of trigger points about money and about success. And so, like, if you have a negative relationship with money in terms of how you feel emotionally about it, it's going to always cause you to maybe not set goals in the right way or not be able to handle, life. Like life happens and you need money to deal with it. So I think that having a really good handle on your emotional intelligence is going to definitely help you with your money skills. I don't think I mentioned this before, but I did a couple courses that I actually put together. So at my company, Covington Ridge Financial, where I'm vice president of operations, I did a 5 week budget course where I taught, this was like an extra like mentorship thing that I did for the employees, where it was like, let me teach you how to like, budgeting one-on-one, get like a financial foundation. I did the same kind of course for a nonprofit called Phoenix Dream Center, and
Oh,
they focus
cool.
on helping people who have been victims of sex trafficking try to like reacclimate back into the world. And so I did like a 7 week, course
Wow.
about like how can you understand this relationship with money and how you can use it to like build this life that you want. So let's talk about this goal setting, because I definitely want to be able to provide these tools to your audience as well.
Well, I mean, with all the work that you've done, almost a decade now, do you think everyone needs big goals, very complex goals?
So I will say that in the my controversial opinion is no. I'm more of a fan of small achievable goals. There are some people, and it's really personality driven, I would have to say, like this is
Mhm.
why your like Gallup assessment and like knowing yourself is key. Some people need those like the 10 time rule and the stretch goals, and they really need that to force them to push themselves beyond. I don't like that. I have a personality. So my one of my top five in my Gallup assessment is discipline. And so
Mhm.
I have a very need of like structure and discipline and progress. Like I need to see
Yeah.
progress is happening. And so for me, having like small, achievable goals, smart goals, right? Like I set smart goals, and I'm not saying that they're so easy that they're not challenging,
No, but
but
you're
they,
getting wins. You're feeling the reward of some of the work that you're doing. That
yes.
helps propel you to keep going.
Yes, because for me, when I set these big gigantic goals, if I'm like halfway through and I'm like I'm not going to achieve it, I might just give up, right? And so that's the thing of like you really need to know yourself, but like know the emotions behind that. So like why don't I like setting big goals, and why do the small goals work for me? So on an emotional level, the small goals work for me because I just like being able to celebrate myself. I like
Yep.
that sense of recognition and accomplishment, and I want to be able to get that faster, as opposed to some people are totally fine of like I'm willing to wait for this big result at the end, and that's okay. Like there's
Mhm.
no right or wrong. It's just really knowing what works for me and what works for you.
Yeah, I feel like in the business world and in this world of maybe self-improvement, if you think of like the place you might go in the Barnes and Noble, like let's head back there and let's get smart with our personal finance.
Yeah.
The goals are important, but it's almost like people that write a book. Writing doesn't literally mean you always have to be using a pen, pencil, paper, journal. It could be
Right.
that you're literally thinking and maybe you're typing it out or you audio record it somewhere. So like the goal setting could live more in a mental state, I think, and the goals can just be different for different people. But like if you're not highly disciplined, there's little things like an automation of one account takes that money deposit and moves it over to the next place and it's done and you know it's going to be there. There's going to be an overdraft and that's not fun. So there's a
Right.
penalty. So you're not going to let that happen. It's okay to implement some of the apps or different things that are strategies. I know that in some of the top five, if I see people have adaptability, there's actually, this is almost one of my favorites, but it's also one of those that is really hard for me. People with high adaptability, you would think that it means you walk into the room and you can just adapt to the environment, but it actually is more of that go with the flow, fly by the seat of your pants. I have low adaptability. I'm more rigid. I have a routine. Everything needs to fall into the calendar. My business partner and husband is high adaptability. Oh boy, he can drive me nuts. So sometimes I talk to him and I say, your adaptability is really driving me nuts today, and we laugh about it. But his strengths and talents in his business, he has two other businesses, that's really good for his work. So it does shine when it needs to, but it can drive me nuts. But people that might have high adaptability doesn't mean they're bad for a team. They're actually probably pretty good to partner with a person like myself. It can bring more of a flow, a little bit of an ease. It actually pushes me on vacation sometimes too that, otherwise I wouldn't allow for. But those people with adaptability might need more strict processes that they have to open up and dial into. My mother's the same way. She has to have an actual system to follow, and she loves that. But when she's off work, she is not scheduled out. That's
Right. She's
important
like,
for
I
her
want to
too.
relax. I don't want to be looking at the schedule. So,
Yes.
no, I think this is perfect time to use like a money example, right? So,
Yep.
I help when I coach people, a lot of the starting point when you're talking about money is debt. I mean, let's face it, like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people have debt in America. And so, it's something that we have to address. And that credit card debt is the worst one. So, for example, somebody who has a credit card who is not as disciplined, they're probably going to be people who are overspending their credit card. So, like, I have a credit card, but I also have like the most elaborate spreadsheet in the world of like how I
I
budget
bet
my
you
money. But to your
do.
point, everybody's not like that, and I'm not
Yeah.
suggesting everybody get a spreadsheet, but what I am saying is if you're not disciplined enough to use that credit card only for the amount you can pay each month, then you have to stop having a, like, I really tell people, I'm like, stop having a credit card, use gift cards, use cash,
Sure.
um,
There's other
do
methods.
different things so that you can have that discipline built in, like you're saying, these automatic things that are available to you. And then but the reason you got to think about that is like, what is the emotion about why they're using the credit card, right? So again, this goes back to really understanding the emotion. So typically what I see, especially for people who have kids, so
Mm.
people tend to overspend because they have a hard time telling their kids no. They don't want to be, they don't like that feeling of like, I can't provide for my
Sure.
child, or I have to tell them no when they say that they want something. Or let's face it, parents tell me all the time like the kids need something unexpected, something for school,
Yeah.
something medical, something comes up, and so you just use that credit card because you don't have your emergency savings built up, and so now you're putting things on a credit card, right? So
Right.
like you got to think about the emotion of why you're using the credit card, attach that to your personality of like how you set goals and manage money, and then now we can come up with a plan, right? So then I can
Yeah.
give you a plan of, this is how you're going to get out of debt, this is how you're going to use your credit card, effectively to rebuild your credit, this is how you can still do things for your child, but having a certain budget, right? Like have cash that's like, son, daughter, I've got $20, this is, find something
Yep.
that's within $20,
Yep.
right? When you go on vacation, I just told a woman who was going out of town and she has the same kind of trouble with using her credit card, and I'm like, don't take your credit card with you. If you need to get gift cards or take out the cash, then do that, because once the money's up, the money's up,
Right.
right? So it is really just, you got to really dig into that awareness piece of what works for you, and then to those, when you're dealing with another person, whether it's a child, whether it's a spouse, whether maybe you're on vacation with a friend and your friend likes to spend money like crazy and you're like, hey, I got to be more mindful of my budget.
Right.
I think it's like, by having those emotional intelligence skills, again, you can have those conversations where you don't have to feel ashamed about maybe not having as much money or feel
Right.
guilt about, anything. It's really about helping you feel more confident
Mm-hmm.
and helping you have those conversations, because you need to have the
Yep.
conversations. You can't avoid them, because all that's going to do if you avoid them is create more negativity. When you look at your bank account next month and you're like, what happened? What did I
Right. You
do?
know that's coming. So
Yeah,
don't do that to yourself. You know that's coming. Gosh,
yeah.
there's just so many things. I love your perspective on that. I think what's important, and I always talk about this when it comes to the pathways of peak performance, and when you listen to the original pathways, like why I built this 5 step system, it really came from at the very beginning of COVID. It was like the collection of the greatest hits of all these stories of my clients and just things that people were going through, and just the stress and the mental illness and all these things are just combined and just completely triggered by what was going on starting in 2020. If you can be proactive in advance and not reactive, you can get through so much. If it's COVID, if it's a sickness, hey, I'm on maternity leave and I'm not getting paid for a period of time, whatever it might be, you start with the foundation, know who you are. How do you tick and how are you going to react? So if you're on that vacation and you're overspending because your friend has more money and that is a problem, maybe we have to reframe who our friends are, because if they're not accepting of the situation, maybe that's just not the trip you go on. But you got to look within yourself. part of the other piece when it comes to getting money smart is I want people to feel more confident that not everybody has a bachelor's in finance. I am not an accounting brain. I am still smart enough to build out a business or work with people in the financial services arena. There is such a place for anyone as long as they want to serve others, but you don't always have to be plugging in numbers, like you said, the spreadsheet. I love a spreadsheet, but I'm not mapping out numbers for my clients. I know my gift is in transactional work and insurance. That's where I stay. So when we're talking about the goal setting, I want people back to the word of the confidence. We keep talking about confidence, but if you're real with yourself and you know how you need to set some things up so that you're more successful, you have more confidence and then you're not reacting. So I love that gift card idea because the money's gone. You can't buy the extra, pina colada or whatever at the
Yeah.
$20 cocktail. Okay. But then you're also allowing yourself to spend money. I feel like right now there's a thing that's happening where we're almost like it's okay to go get that cup of coffee if everything else is dialed in. Because I think we were always told like, make sure you're budgeting and not spending money for whatever, don't be overspending for these frills. But I think sometimes if you've done the work, you can reward yourself for whatever it might be. So I think if you're utilizing some of the tips like you're saying, maybe you can splurge a little bit because you've done the work in advance. And so if you're more routine like us, maybe it's a little bit easier, but build the systems in. If you are a little bit more like my husband, that's okay too. It's okay how you are built, but build in the systems that can help you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to touch on, so like you and I are both very proactive people. Like we have the ability to see like steps and steps and steps
Mm-hmm.
into the future, but not everybody is like that. And so when I work with clients who are not able to like understand, one of the things that I tell them is like, this is the easiest way for me to get you to, maybe you can't think as far ahead as I can, but I just need you to at least a couple steps. It's like, it's not a
Yeah.
matter of if, it's a matter of when. You are always going to have the tire blowout, the medical
Yeah.
expense, the kid situation, unexpected expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is life. Like this is what happens. Maybe the raise you thought you were going to get didn't come through. Like these are things that are going to happen. So it's stop thinking about, well, if this happens,
Mm-hmm.
and just know that it's going to happen. So
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to think of like when is it going to happen, just know that it's going to happen. And that kind of helps people take the pressure off of like trying to figure out this week and September and October, November, like it's going to happen. The second thing that you mentioned about like, okay, maybe if my relationships with people are not working out, we need to rethink our relationships. And I think that one thing that people do struggle with, because it can be a confidence thing, is having conversations about money. It just is it's a
Mm-hmm.
difficult conversation to have, right? So again, like let's try to come up with ways to bring up that conversation that feel less where how do I want to say it? That feel less threatening, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't have to divulge all of your personal financial information, right? Like if you have a budgeting, so I'm going to give you a perfect example. I just last week had to replace my HVAC unit. I live in Arizona. It's 100 degrees at all times. And obviously for anybody who is a homeowner, you know that is a very expensive purchase.
Yep.
And I had some plans with my friends coming up this weekend and I need to adjust them, but I didn't need to go into details about it. It was simply
Right.
a conversation that was like, hey, some things in my budget have changed. I'm not able to do this, but what if we do this instead, right? So instead of feeling like I'm saying no or I can't do this, I'm like, what if I offer an alternative solution
Right.
that is in my price range, that is in my budget? So like instead of going out on a girls' night where we're like going out and I'm spending money on Lyft and like you said, $20 drinks and all this stuff, why don't we do like a game night at my house? And
Yep.
then we can have wine and we can have stuff, but it's way
Still
less
quality
expensive.
time.
Right? It's exactly. So I think it's try different things, that you're comfortable with. But I think that really helps is like, don't think of it of like, I have to say no and cut things off, because that can be really hard for people, especially if they don't have that discipline type skill like I do. Like, it's really hard to like go cold turkey or like say no
Yeah.
entirely. But if you kind of flip it of like, okay, I can't do this, but I can do this. I can't do this, but I can do this. Maybe I can't have the Starbucks coffee, every day of the week, but I can maybe have it once a week as a reward, or I can go to this
Hmm.
other coffee shop that's less expensive, or maybe I don't even really want the coffee and I'd rather save that and put it towards something different, right? So I think if we
Yeah.
look at it as, we're not eliminating as much as we're just
Yeah.
reprioritizing. We're just, again, it's a reframe. It's a reframe in our mind
Hmm.
to help our emotional side of things not get so stressed or anxious or guilty or insecure. And it really just helps us have that better relationship with money, like I said.
Yeah, when you get a few weeks outside of that event that you've maybe given an alternative, you've modified the plans, and then you're 2 weeks out and you don't have that thing on the credit card or whatever it might be, it feels so good, and then you're limiting your stress.
Yeah.
It's amazing. But what if we could do that for ourselves? So I always love talking with you about how to just really dial into ourselves and then make things work, whether it's, on the personal side, but then rolling it into business too. But really having people build money goals so they can have some success and have some fun with it. So, Jovita, how do we have people find you? Where can they find you if they want to hang out after the fact?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually going to provide a free goal setting tracker and habit tracker for your audience.
Okay.
So I'll put the link in there. My website is growwithjovita.com. I'm
Hmm.
also on LinkedIn and Instagram. But I definitely want to give that freebie because, again, I'm a person that's like, I need to kind of see things. Like,
Yes.
I need to, I'm a visual person, I'm a visual learner. But if you're not that, if you can keep it all in your mind and keep track of it, that's fine as well. But really setting those goals and the habit
Hmm.
trackers help. I'll also provide a discount code for anybody who wants to get my Smart Goals Success Habits package
Okay.
for any additional coaching. Like I said, I've done different courses for people
Hmm.
on setting goals and budgeting and stuff like that. So I definitely want to help your audience as much as possible.
Well, perfect. Well, Jovita, I'm sure there'll be more to come. So I appreciate you being with us today. And thanks for everybody listening. And I'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Amber Stitt Show. For more information about the podcast, books, articles, and more, please visit me at amberstitt.com. Until next week, enjoy your journey at home and at work. Thank you for listening.